welcome to another episode of the Everything's Been Done podcast. I'm your host, Dustin Klein, and today's episode is brought to you by the Everything's Been Done Gear Shop, where all your wildest dreams can come true. From doodads to thingamajigs to good graphics and torso covers, the Everything's Been Done Gear Shop's got you covered. Links below. Today we've got a very, very, very special guest for you. You may have ridden his routes. You may have seen him on the, whatever the thing is, the regular show. The one and only Mr. Ron Lewis. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you for having me.
It is such a pleasure.
Oh, it's always a pleasure to speak with you, hang out, do the thing in the place.
So good, so good. So did you know that you are like the people love you on the video series? Did you know this?
I didn't really know that. No, what is it? Why do they?
What is it?
I mean, there's always plenty of other people, I suppose, but I don't know. What is it?
I don't know what it is. I think that we're getting a lot of choppy audio commentary from the people. Ooh. I don't know if it's you, if it's me. Everything on this end looks good though, so.
Choppy audio, huh?
Choppy audio.
Choppy audio?
I think that people just, you got a good positive mental attitude. The mustache doesn't hurt. I think your good vibes exude out of every orifice.
Oh, every Sisyphus? That's a terrible thing. Pro gear, pro attitude. Just got to bring the pro gear, pro attitude.
Maybe turn your mic down just ever so slightly there.
Okay.
Perfect.
My pro gear might not be so pro after all, turns out.
It's too pro, I think, is probably the issue. So, I figured what better way for people to get to know you than to have you on the podcast, because people are always asking about you. They want to know more. They want more Ron. Nobody can get enough Ron, so we just figured let's get some more Ron going here,
Yeah, let's do it. Let's hang out. I'm all for it. I'm here all day anyway, so, you caught me at the office.
I basically, this is entrapment. You have to be on
out of here. There's got to be a way to open the door and get out. I've been stuck down here for what are we, day 48 now? So,
I'm curious, where did you grow up, Ron?
Well, a few different places. I mean, like a lot of people, we had one major move, but it was kind of like a few different sort of growing up experiences, and they're pretty different. Initially from California in Pasadena, up in Eaton Canyon, right at the base of Mount Wilson and the Angeles National Forest. But sort of grew up looking at that stuff and never had any idea of all the cool roads and stuff that were going on up there. But, now when I go back and get on a bike back there, it's like, oh my God, if I knew then what I know now. It's just such an amazing sort of jump off point for so many cycling routes out there. But then we moved out to the East Coast right as I was going into fourth grade, which is kind of like a really awkward time to move because you're at such a weird sort of formative stage to be kind of like uprooted from, I was just getting into BMX bikes and skateboards and California culture in like the mid 80s, and like everything was awesome and exciting and radical. And then it's just like, we're gonna go to the conservative Northern Virginia suburbs outside of Washington, D.C., which was like kind of weird. It was like a major culture shock to go out to Washington, D.C. in like the mid 80s. So, but then, spent time, in high school and early college years out in the D.C. area, which, musically, culturally, it's a pretty interesting, awesome, dynamic place. But, mid 80s, being a little kid, it's like totally weird. It's like, where's my skate culture, beach stuff, cool rock and roll shit? And yeah. So basically, D.C. area, California, college in Montana, formative early adult years in the 20s playing in bands in the Seattle area, and I live in Portland now. So that's like the nutshell version.
Where did you get into music? Was that in fourth grade in Los Angeles. Pasadena's in Los Angeles, Southern California.
Yeah, I started young. I worked in a record store when I was in fourth grade. I had a DJ
Really?
radio station. Yeah, I was super into the early punk stuff. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh,
No,
Jesus Christ.
in high school, like everybody else, sort of like dabbling around with like rebellious phases, getting into like punk rock, and usually most of it channeled through like skateboarding culture.
Yeah.
Kind of how it happened, as I'm sure it did for you as well.
Was that in DC then, or was it? Where were you at that point?
Suburbs. It was sort of adjacent to DC. So like we were absorbing a lot of the culture from Washington DC. So like we were heavily influenced by like the Minor Threat stuff.
Yeah.
And all the rad Discord shows, but we would have to drive in because we lived out in like the kind of like the burbs.
And then is that where you started playing music and stuff also?
Oh yeah. Started messing around in the basement, like playing drums and guitar and 4-tracking and getting into that kind of stuff. So that led down its own kind of rabbit hole.
Did either of your parents play music?
No, they hated it. It was a reaction to my parents. They hated music. They didn't actively hate music, but they weren't musical. I mean, they, the closest they came was like the Saturday Night Fever soundtrack and maybe some like Mariah Carey stuff. And I think my mom might have been into like late period Billy Joel, like in the 90s or something. But yeah, it definitely wasn't like a musically dynamic household. Like music was like the escape. It was like my world as opposed to like the world that, you live in at home. It was like this weird sort of escapist sort of world of like cool, dangerous, fucked up shit instead of, cool parent stuff.
Yeah, that's sorry. Apparently we're having a lot of audio issues when it's on my side, so I don't. That's why I call this live stream fail, because
nice. I like the built-in sort of potential for failure.
Because every time, I don't know, guys, everything looks according to plan over here, so I apologize. But, I apologized in advance, even before the whole thing started.
If it sounds good to me and it sounds good to Dustin, sounds like the problem is on everybody else's end.
I like that. There you go. Sorry, I was getting distracted by all that stuff, so, fuck it. Maybe we get to do this again, too. So, music and such was through, on the East Coast, teenager. Did you start playing in bands at that time, or were you just making music?
It was a little bit of both. We played in like scrappy little bands with my friends. Like we didn't really like go on tour or do like, pro style band playing at that point. This would have been like, 91 through like 94. It was like pretty much like playing in the basement, jamming basement indie rock jams, smoking pot, 4-tracking, like a lot of that kind of stuff. I was really into like Slint and Pavement and Sonic Youth and a lot of that kind of slacker, kind of garbagey lo-fi indie rock stuff from that era. So it was very, very conducive to holding up in the basement with a 4-track and like a bunch of pedals and making like hissy, soundscapey kind of non-rock stuff on your 4-track.
Yeah, that sounds cool. And
yeah.
So at what point did you, I guess because I know that music and cycling, they kind of crossroads for you at a certain point. But I'm wondering if what builds up to that point?
Just one, actually it did intersect with cycling in kind of a strange roundabout way. Cause like educationally I went to art school, which is sort of like, that's not outside the realm of possibility with a lot of people who are into like bands and 4-track creative recording and stuff. And, eventually that led to touring in bands for quite a while. And fast forward to like Seattle in like the mid 00s and like 2010. And I was playing and touring with the Fruit Bats. And like we had been going at it for quite a while. And I was just kind of getting burned out on it. And every tour I would come back from, looking for something to kind of get myself back in shape, and was really kind of taken with like fixed gear bicycles, which were really popular at the time. And so
Where were you living?
Seattle.
Go on.
And you know, got one of those, got another one of those, got a couple geared bikes, and eventually got kind of like obsessed with like, you know, rehabilitating old bikes and procuring new bikes and configuring different sort of forms of different bikes. And it became kind of like an anti-tour escape thing. Like you come back from tour and it's like, it's so different, and it's something that you're in control of instead of being, you know, at the sort of like mercy of other schedules that are outside of your choice. So it became sort of an antithesis to the touring life, which I had done for like, I don't know, maybe 8 years or so. So
Yeah, that's a long time. I'm. I feel like, how did you end up getting into like? Because for a musician, at that point where touring bands is like kind of an accomplishment, like, you know, like you don't just start doing that. Is it just through people that you met, and then eventually, like, I mean, it seems like that was something that you wanted to do also.
yeah, it was good for a while. It's just one of those things that's just like, it's great for a period of time. It's
Totally.
amazing, like
Right.
when you're in your sort of like 20s and
Yeah.
early 30s, when like you can stay up super late, you're good to go, just sort of rolling with the punches and just kind of tucking and rolling and for a couple of years, and you know, being able to sort of scrap it and make it happen, and have fun with it. But like, you know, you start to get to a certain age and it's just like, okay, man, and I'm kind of getting a little tired of like the super late nights, the unpredictability of schedules, and that kind of thing. So I just figured it was kind of time for a little bit more stability. So sort of like parlayed that into other stuff.
Yeah, and cycling was one of those things.
Cycling was definitely like one of those things, because it's like, it's so physical, it's so control it, at least at the time for me, it was very, very controlled. It was something that I had like all the control over. And yeah, I think kind of like psychologically, like touring kind of put me in like a little bit of a weird space, because you're always at the mercy of other people's schedules
Oh,
when you're sort of like not running the show. I was like kind of like the side man, playing the guitar and keyboards and eventually bass, like in Fruit Bat. So but ultimately it's like when tours came up, you're like, hey, I'm going on tour now. So cycling was a nice way to be like, I'm going to go on a ride now, and I'm going to start now, and I'm going to go this far, and then I'm going to finish when I finish. And it was something that was that I could focus my energies into, that was like kind of the opposite of that.
yeah, and then I think we just have to touch on this. You did play in the Shins for a hot minute. Is that correct?
Yeah, we did sort of like 2 tours during that era, and I played on the Port of Morrow record. It was like sort of in
Cool.
between eras for that band. It was like after the initial sort of the kind of like the original lineup, and then like the sort of kind of ever changing lineup that it kind of has been ever since. It's mainly James Mercer's project, so he's kind of like
Cool.
the songwriter, the visionary. He created the whole thing. But yeah, I was in it in sort of 2009, 2010 era.
That's cool. Yeah. Just a little side note. So with the cycling stuff, you're in Seattle. It's like, you know, you're kind of getting burnt out on touring and stuff. Was was it tricky? Like sometimes I wonder how difficult it is for people that are just getting into cycling. Like you don't really know what all the things are, or who to, you know, who to ride with or where to go. Was there, did you feel like any kind of challenge through that, getting like kind of slowly entering into this world?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, cycling is one of those really deep, intimidating worlds, like record collecting or comic book stores or exotic fish collecting, where it's just like there's a lot of sort of hoarded knowledge, and you find that, I think, in like a lot of like, at least you did at the time, like by culture. I felt really intimidated by it. It's like, oh, you don't know about the new sort of Shimano Ultegra 10-speed group, which it was at the time. Like, or you go into a bike shop and I was like always mortified to look like such the noob that I was. Like I didn't know the stuff that I was talking about. You can easily be kind of talked circles around, and so it kind of led me to just ride by myself all the time. Like I was just, for like 2 or 3 years, like I never I didn't have any other bike friends. It was just like me riding by myself, which is like a very strange entry point, but I think it's pretty common for a lot of people, you know, to be like really intimidated by shop culture, group ride culture, and especially racing culture, because I mean, there's the fitness buy-in and it's very cliquish and it's very intimidating. So yeah, coming in like the weird way.
Yeah, well, like you said, I bet it's not that uncommon for people to do that. You just ride by yourself. And then, so eventually, did you start meeting people or finding like what ended up happening?
Uh, Moved to Portland. Portland is
Oh,
amazing. It's it's so much more friendly and inviting and inclusive feeling than a place like Seattle. Or I mean, you're from the Bay Area too. You spent time there. I imagine like the cycling scene would be pretty intimidating in a big city like that. But yeah, I came down to Portland and it was just like other people you would see on a bike. They would actually say like hello, and then you know, my buddy Brandon Day, who that's the other person that I started OMTM with back in, gosh, 2014 or 2015. He was kind of just getting into cycling too, and so we kind of came into it together through like road cycling and kind of getting out into the sort of hinterlands of like Larch Mountain and stuff. So I had another person to do it with, and then he and I sort of like began meeting other people through. Then it was 21st Avenue Bikes over in Northwest, and they put together a team, and we started racing on the team, and met a whole bunch of other people that way, and kind of that was like the entry point into like cycling culture proper.
right. Yeah. Well, racing, that makes sense. Which is kind of that I a little get a little bummed when I hear that because I'm very much of the philosophy of rides over races. I don't think that racing is the end all be all to everything or anything. So, but
Did
of
you ever?
course, there's a community built around it. So inevitably, you're going to get that out of it.
Yeah. Did you ever race yourself? I don't think I've ever asked you that.
No, I just have never. I've done a couple alley cats as a bike messenger. I did
Okay.
like one night at PRI to just try it. Like it just, I get too wound up about it, and it makes it not fun at all.
I know. I went through that same thing too. And I think a lot of people do who gravitate towards adventure riding is that like so much of your self worth and your cycling identity is pinned on how you do in races.
Yuck.
And there's so much of your time and your energy and your focus is spent optimizing for these very strange formats that don't exist in natural riding, like going hard and redlining for 45 minutes in muddy circles. Like
Yeah.
who does that normally?
Right.
or or tucking in and being really, really strategic and kind of biding your time so that you can explode in like the last 30 seconds is like that just it feels very unnatural to optimize your fitness and your cycling structure around those types of forms. It just felt really foreign to me, and I think it does to a lot of other people, which is probably why gravel, adventure riding, and more social types of riding forms are so popular these days.
Yeah, thank God that it's finally like kind of coming around. It is about like going for a ride. It's not about like competition can be good, but when it's all about like it's just like cold and it's like not very welcoming and like just if you're always against the other person, of course you can build camaraderie, but that's like a subsidiary of it. It's automatically it's you against everybody else, and it's just that sounds gross. Like that's not like that doesn't happen in skating, that doesn't happen in creative endeavors, so it's yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of it was kind of strange culturally. I always have designs like every year. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people do too. Every year I'm coming around. It's like January, February, March. It's like, maybe I'm going to try racing again. Maybe I'm going to try, doing a couple road races out at PIR or doing, some of the early season Dirty Circle stuff when everybody has like, kind of winter legs and give it a shot. Of course, it never happens because it takes so much discipline to get in any semblance of form that you would even be competitive or feel good to compete. That it kind of never happens. But Ryan Francesconi once wisely said, "The only way racing is fun is if you're doing well at it." So
Totally. Very good
it's
perspective.
only fun if you're if you're decent and you're competitive, and if you're not, it can be sort of defeating and depressing and make you feel like you're just like a terrible cyclist because you're coming in near the back of the pack. And I always had this tendency to kind of give up when I felt really like defeated, and I would just stop racing and pull off the course, and like that's no way to race. So yeah, I stopped doing it.
Yeah, which is exactly why this is such a perfect culmination of that's why the OMTM stuff is like was so appealing to me. Obviously, that's why it was part of the reason that was appealing to you too. It's like this way to get together and do these crazy rides and experiences that are not competitive at all. If people want to pin it and go heavy, for sure, go for it. And there's a time and a place, but it's not, the whole thing isn't based on this like who's the fastest, like bleh.
It's not really even about who's the anything. It's like,
right,
you don't even have to show up at the time that the ride starts. You can show up later. You can do it on there's no hard and fast thing to it. Like anybody and everybody is welcome, all skill levels. It's just like the only buy-in is like being able to ride the whole course, if you know. And that's why oftentimes we'll offer like longer epic courses for people who need to kind of hammer it the whole time and want to do like a big 100-mile day. But we also try to offer like shorter versions, multiple versions for each type of organized ride. I mean, during the pandemic, obviously we're not doing rides necessarily, but I think that's kind of like part of the appeal, and why a lot of people are getting into that is just like you can do it on your own terms. You don't have to like reach any kind of threshold to like qualify to be able to do this type of thing. It's like you can chill ride it. You can ride it by yourself. You can ride it by, you know, moonlight. You can do whatever. It's like, you know, kind of for everybody. That's the fun part about it. It's built in.
And then, so you and Brandon Day you started around 2014? Like, what was that? Were you guys trying to start a thing, or did it just come out organically?
Yeah, it came up super organically because we were just like tired of not having people to ride with, because all of our racing teammates were always being like, no man, I got to stay in like zone 4 for the next 2 weeks leading up to the big open classic challenge, you know. And we would be bummed out because everybody was optimizing for cross, and everybody was, because we were mainly a cross team. And so we decided that we wanted to go and put together this website so that we could sort of document some of the fun places that we had been out riding, like out, you know, Bacona Way, Dixie Mountain Way, Pumpkin. I mean, this was like the early days of Portland gravel, like Smoke Ranch and Pumpkin Ridge, and some of these places that we were sort of finding and exploring. Other people were too at the same time, but we wanted to document them so that other people could have like a resource, because at the time there wasn't much of a resource for exploring those types of roads. Like you had to kind of go out and get lost and figure it out for yourself, which is kind of fun, but you know, you do that enough times and you're like, man, I wish I could just go out and ride some vetted gravel that somebody had like nicely presented and written up with great pictures and expectations and GPS tracks. And so that totally didn't exist. So we were like, let's make a website project. Like we had never made a website before. So we were like, this will be fun and interesting. And so we kind of started to put that together, and people started writing the routes, and we were just kind of stoked about that.
Oh, it's perfect. It's such a simple, awesome, obvious thing. It's like a public service that you guys do. It's so amazing. And I love that. I know what you're saying too. You ride enough of these, like, because then you got to memorize all of them and all these routes, and you're kind of like, oh, well, did it connect here? I didn't do it until like a year ago, and now that logging road is weird. Like, it's great to just the library.
Like handwritten crib sheets that were like, take a left at the big tree, and then when you see the haunted spooky chain across the road, go back to where you came from and start. Or like just weird crib sheets like you would, you know, tape to your top tube. And I don't know, that doesn't really work very well. So, but then we found like Ride with GPS, and like that is such a revolutionary way to route plan. And then I mean, I'm still talking like sort of early days of when we were, you know, mainly just doing it with our cross buddies. But I came across Ryan Francesconi in like gosh, was it 2016 or 2017, who had been doing basically the same thing, but going way deeper. And he had a really, really deep base of knowledge of exploring kind of like hinterlands, and then had been loosely leading group rides, which was one thing that we were not doing. We were mainly just focused on like putting together a website. So we started collaborating around, gosh, I think it was 2016 or 27. Yeah, no, maybe it was 2015. Oh my gosh. At any rate, when we started collaborating on routes and throwing actual events and group rides, sort of, it took the whole thing to the next level, because it started creating more of a cohesive community of the people who started coming out to the ride. So it became a very different thing when we started collaborating with Ryan, because he brought his wealth of experience. He had amazing deep route knowledge, like multi-day routes, bike tour stuff, and had gone out like kind of a lot further than we were going out and exploring. So it kind of became something different around that point. But yeah.
What was the first OMTM group ride?
I think it may have been Mosier Mayhem. We had kind of like a hokey metal theme, and we were like, Mosier Mayhem, it's going to be so awesome. And it's pretty tame by the standards of stuff that people are riding today, but started out in Mosier. There was like a big route and then like a medium route. I think we hit a whole bunch of, I think it was flasks of mezcal all along the route, kind of, I guess, irresponsible about it. Like, hey, go on this big bike ride and you may find one of 5 flasks of mezcal out in the boonies. And
That's hilarious. Huh.
Yeah, we met some cool people on some of those rides, though, like out in the woods, like hunting for this stuff. People who we still ride with today. So
Yeah, I mean, I think it's twofold. Like, the routes are so amazing. It's so awesome that there's just this constant library. So like people ask me all the time, "Oh, I want to go to an OMTM event, or I want to ride an OMTM route when I visit Portland." And I'm like, "You can do it anytime you want. Like, you don't have to wait for an event. You can just do them at any point. The library is indefinitely there." But you know, the next level of that is when you do get to mix with all these people. It kind of amplifies, and all these new connections are made, and the experience is so much cooler because of all the people.
yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things we're really missing right now. Is it's like you're just kind of, the season was just getting started, and I could tell people were really getting excited for this season, and we were kind of like, you know, mulling over ideas of what type of routes we were going to do for for this year. And I mean, you were on the Swale Canyon ride that we did back in early March before the lockdown stuff started happening, and it was great. It was amazing. People were so stoked for the season. And then all of this stuff happened, and it was just like, whoa, it's like the rug's pulled out from under you. You kind of had this sadness. It's like, where did our sort of bike culture group thing go? And you miss all the connections with all the people, and you know, you can only ride solo so much without just being like, oh man.
Totally. Yeah, and that, well, I think there's like a funny thing too that happens with OMTM is like, you know, you don't want it to really get to be too big, or there's an issue that happens when it gets to be a little bit too big.
Right. I mean, by design, it's supposed to be scrappy and under the radar, and I mean, it's a DIY thing from the get-go. And when it gets too big, too many eyes get to be on the routes, and you can't have the same kind of level of creativity of route design.
Yeah.
Because some of our favorite riding is like incorporating single track into the mix, some kind of tricky, dodgy, slightly dangerous, like maybe like creek crossings and weird sketchy connectors and steep sort of mountain bikey sections into larger gravel rides. And you know, some of them aren't appropriate for big groups of like 100 plus. And, you know, not only could people get hurt or could people get lost, but they also, it's not good for the terrain. It's not good to bring that many people on trails. And also, you know, we live in logging timberland. There's tons of private property around here. And so some of the stuff you tend to be riding through areas that are owned by sort of like timber companies, and sometimes you make the radar of those timber companies and they tell you can't do it, and so you have to cancel or alter rides. So it's, you get above a certain threshold, and it sort of compromises the creativity. So like in the past year, we've had a lot of issues with that, and so we've like pulled back on certain rides, and we've pulled back on publicizing certain things so that we could kind of keep the routes and the events in the creative spirit as they were sort of initially envisioned, because we didn't want to like just turn them into like gravel grinders all on like public roads, because those are just gravel grinders.
Yeah, and those get boring real fast too.
Right. I mean, there's definitely good ones. They're interesting and fun, but I think some of the creative spirit that really drives us to make routes is finding these lost hidden connectors in these places that most people don't go, and a lot of that isn't appropriate for really big groups. So it's kind of given us a little kind of like time to kind of reconsider some riding in some of these areas. I mean, there's some areas where we've tried to have a ride like 3 or 4 times. And for one reason or another, things keep coming up, whether it be rain, weather, deep snow stuff, companies like logging companies getting in touch and being like, no way, there's active logging operations going on through here. You will be cited or whatever. We've had sort of like state agencies get in touch and be like, you have to have a permit for this type of thing. And so, yeah, you do run into problems when you kind of get above a certain profile.
Yeah, and it's kind of like the same thing happens with bands too. Like you kind of want to keep them small. Like the smaller show has like more energy than the amphitheater. Not always, but I think you get the metaphor.
Right. It just becomes something different. It's a different avenue, a slightly different audience too, because you have enough people coming out that you don't really know. And first and foremost, we make the routes and these rides and the times of year that they're put on to scratch itches, the things that we would want to ride, the places and the types of stuff that we want to do. And that's definitely kind of like not really for everybody, but people are attracted to it because it seems kind of like cool and not exotic, but like there's like a romanticism to being like, oh man, we're gonna go out and totally get lost in these wild areas. And it's like, you could actually get lost in these wild areas, and it's definitely sort of not for everybody, because not everybody shows up with the routes on their GPS devices or even has GPS devices. And so sometimes you get a lot of people you're just like, oh man, I don't know, this might not be for public consumption, some of these really deep routes.
Yeah, and that is a thing that that is a thing I totally distracted the shit out of myself. I'm sorry. I'm so nervous about the audio being fucked up that like that's the only thing I can think about now. How is it? Can you hear this when I do this, anybody? All right. Yeah, the hook with like, I think people, it's funny because the OMTM rides are a like ride at your own risk kind of ride, but when they're big events, people show up and they kind of almost just expect it to be like they're taken care of, and you're like, yo, this is like a survive it kind of an event.
Right. And some of them are, they're really, really not appropriate for coming in with that expectation. You try to put as much of that information out there, but ultimately it's, you can't police everybody. So it becomes a little bit tricky, because when you have as many people showing up as would show up to like a local race or a gravel race or event or something like that you pay for, there is the expectation, I think, that you're going to have like some kind of support, or you're going to be like sweeping the course, or there's going to be some kind of like somebody to bail you out if you pitch down a ravine and taco your wheel or something like that. And these types of things were never meant to have that, because they were always intended for like pretty small groups. They just got really popular is kind of how it went,
Well, and that's the wave of cycling right now. The movement and the trend is this gravel adventure riding. So of course, anything that's having an event like that is going to, it's just the power of the moment,
Right.
Oh, this is an interesting question from Josh McCulloch. Asks if you have any interesting like property owner stories or like, you know, or maybe even Weyerhaeuser, which is one of the forest proper. I don't even know what the fuck they're called. They're like a timber company. You have any
Not,
incidences?
not any like direct conflict issues, but um, yeah, I mean, we had one event. It's an amazing route. Our buddy Ben Swanson wrote it yesterday, and it's funny you should ask that because they one of the best roads we had kind of like ever found in the it's east of Portland by about maybe like I don't know 25 miles or so. This route called the Dark Larch, which explores sort of like Larch Mountain and some of the areas down along the Sandy River. One of the most beautiful roads we had found in like a lot of our explorations. We kind of named it the Dark Larch Bypass, and it was this beautiful forested, lush, like winding serpentine double track forest road, just really like kind of Fern Gully vibes. And when we were putting together the finalized route to ride it, basically like last year at this time, I guess it was like last February, we had discovered that there was a new active logging operation going on, and they had totally destroyed the road, like full on clear cut, like decimated, like it was so dark and so terrible, and they had destroyed the road. The area was just like it was kind of a nightmare. So we routed around that and ran into just issue after issue with the company that was running the logging stuff, and we are like, well, let's see if we can run it around the logging, not go through the logging. And everybody that rode through there, before the event happened, got stopped and got yelled at and got harassed by like the security people, because I mean it is technically private timber land, but they are also roads that are on the map, and they connect one public place to another accessible public place, and usually you don't have much of a problem. But we actually got the logging company people got in touch with us, and they were like, you cannot run this event, this is absolutely not allowed, you're going to be cited for trespassing. And so yeah, that kind of freaked us out a little bit, because obviously we don't want anyone to be getting in trouble. We don't want to be liable for trespassing. But so we had to kind of take that route offline, and people continued to ride it. And sure enough, like every time they would ride the route, they would get nabbed by like the security people who were like posted up in RVs at both entrances to these stretches of road. And we had told everybody via like our sort of Google group and mailing list, we were like, don't ride this, you're going to get nabbed, and it's just going to cause more tension between the people who are managing the land and cyclists. And we don't want to give cycling a bad name, so we were telling people to stay off, but they sort of still do it. But we had kind of created a treasure hunt component to the ride, as we sometimes do. And we went out and planted these little treasure packs that had like, some little gummy snacks, some sour worms, a couple cool like patches and stickers from like local organizations and stuff like that. And after we had called the ride off, first due to snow, and then the second time we had to call the ride off, it was due to this logging cease and desist business. So we had a rider go out and kind of sweep everything and pick up the packages, except they couldn't find the last one until yesterday. And Ben went out and found the last package yesterday, and some of the patches were kind of frayed, and the stickers were kind of like gnarled and like waterlogged, and I think it looked like some squirrels had been into the gummy worms. So we need to definitely make sure, if we cancel the ride, that we've already posted little treasure hunt things. We have to make sure that those all get picked up, because I thought they all got picked up, but apparently there was one left. So I don't know if it's really a landowner story, but it's kind of just weird part of everything, because like this stuff is changing out there all the time because of so much active logging going on. And just, you're in the Pacific Northwest, so odds are you're going to be either going through or adjacent to like timberland. It's sometimes not very optimum riding, because it's kind of there's a lot of destruction that happens in those areas, but it does happen. So
yeah, this is an interesting question from Ben Swanson. Actually, I think this is a different Ben. Crazy, because you just mentioned the one we know. He lives in rural Minnesota and is basically wondering, like, how would he start to build a community like OMTM where he's based out of?
You just kind of start doing it. I mean, if you have routes that you enjoy riding by yourself or with your buddies, I mean,
Share them.
you can just share them or find some way to act as a hub or resource and kind of like post them somewhere, like building a website or setting up an ambassador page via Ride with GPS, which is like hands down, we found one of the best platforms ever for building and sharing routes.
Oh.
Go as deep or as sort of like user friendly as you want with it, but it's an incredible resource. But just building routes and vetting routes and testing them out and sharing them with people, and then if you want them to have a group ride component, you can host events and post events.
Yeah, and also when you first start an event or any project of any form, no one gives a shit in the beginning. It's don't take it personal. They just don't know if it's real. They don't know if it's consistent. They don't know anything about it. So you just have to do a few and just don't have any expectations. And inevitably, it's going to grow. And then there you go. There's your growth. And then you just keep doing it if you enjoy it.
Right. If it's cool. If it sucks, nobody comes, then it might just suck. But
yeah, but in the beginning, nobody knows about. Things are very slow in the beginning, and things suck in the beginning, but that doesn't mean they won't get better. So just keep doing anything that you're passionate about, whether it's a route, a band, a fucking crappy podcast where the audio doesn't work. You just got to keep stabbing away at it.
Yeah, and just figuring it out. I mean, we used to do tons of like different types of night rides that we would like name different things or whatever. And sometimes there would be just like 2 people that would come, and sometimes there would be 10. And it's like just the consistency of doing it over and over again, and then upping the quality as you do it seems like kind of a pretty good way to go.
Yeah, which I think is kind of inevitable for the creator, because you can't just stagnate. It's boring. I'm curious. So you ride a lot of that Zen bike. I feel like the two. What are the two main bikes, or what are the main bikes that you ride right now?
Me personally, I have a Zen AR45, which is true temper steel. It was kind of an early adventure bike. Now pretty standard, like a high volume tire adventure bike meant to either do 700 or 650 wheel set, clearance for like 2.1 up to like 2.25, fender mounts, that kind of thing. Like that's all like standard stuff. But this was back in like 2014. There was a contract builder here in Portland, whose house brand, his name was David Warrenetz, and his house brand was Zen, and he did like a cross bike, a road bike, a couple other varieties. But this AR45 was like the one that was kind of like ahead of its time, because it was like it combined all these things that didn't exist in one place, and now it's like that everybody has. That's like the standard now. So it's kind of like an older sort of prototype of like what is now the standard adventure bike. And
sorry.
Got a weird 1-inch top tube, so it's kind of like it looks a little bit noodly, but it's got all the flex where the flex is needed, and all the stiffness where the stiffness is needed down on the down tube, and the chain stays.
And that's a big boy bike too. That's like a 69.
It's a 69er. Yeah, definitely.
This is actually a really cool question from Richard S. He says, what if you had to recommend one route what routes, whatever, one or a few, would you recommend for an out-of-towner? That's a really good question.
We're coming to like the Portland region?
Yeah, like someone's visiting Portland, they want to do an OMTM route, they know the website, like which one would you take a stab at? And also, before you answer that, the one thing to note for anybody that is looking to do this, there is a thorough list or a thorough like description for each route too. So these aren't just like, here's a route, do it. There's like a lot of explanation of what each one is.
Yeah, and what you're going to get into. I suppose before you would suggest any one route to any one rider sight unseen, you would have to ask what their experience level was, what distance they were trying to get into, what kind of day they were looking for. Because
I think this is
in-city rides to like very deep rides that you could probably break up into multi-days if you wanted to.
I'm going to assume that this is someone that's similar to us that does adventure riding and has a gauge on what their capacity is. So,
Right.
I mean, I guess from that, the answer just see what's available.
I would say like there's two things that would probably be the first go-tos. The first one being like actually on the Washington side, we have one sort of series of rides or routes called the Falls Creek Hinterland, which is really, really beautiful. It explores the Wind River region of the southern tier of the Gifford Pinchot National Forest out of Carson, Washington. And it's just like there's short, manageable, sort of bite-sized loops. There's like medium adventure-sized loops, and there's like big, epic, sort of 90-mile, 9,000-foot iterations that all basically start and finish at the same place. So that would be a good one to look into. There's some cool caves you can check out. The views are absolutely epic. It's beautiful. And I guess I would first have to ask like what time of year you're going to do it, because seasonality around here in the Northwest is like a major sort of majorly affects like where you're going to ride when. Another summertime one that would be nice would be like Japanese Hollow out of the Dalles is really, really nice too. That's a very sort of Cadillac gravel, very smooth, you can practically do it on a road bike. It's better on like 42s to 45s or 47s, but those ones are pretty nice. There's some stuff out in the Coast Range, like the Timber Log Jam stuff is really nice, the Hell of the North Plains, but each one is such a different experience. It just really kind of depends on what you're looking for. But I would say like Falls Creek Hinterland, some version of that, or some version of like the Japanese Hollow one they're pretty good, sort of not low commitment, but it's like if you had to do one, those are pretty exemplary of this area, I would say, in very different ways.
I'm just personally curious. So, say like normal life, like if it was not lockdown, April or May time, like how often are you riding a week? And then, like on the weekends, are you always doing like some kind of big ride? And will you do them solo or will you do them with a group? There's like 10 questions for you.
If we're talking like normal time, like a year ago right
Yes.
now, I mean, we were supposed to be out in Mitchell staying at the Spoken Hostel last weekend, exploring Rajneeshpuram, the John Day area, the Twickenham. Like we were supposed to be doing a big weekend. So if it were normal times, like a year ago, yeah, usually every weekend, one of the weekend days, there's some kind of like exploratory mission or ride going on. Preparing for a route or putting together a route or figuring out some section of a route so that, something can be ready for an event. Weekly stuff, I do more road riding than anything else. If I'm just going out the front door, it's usually just going to be some kind of road ride in the West Hills, or lately during the pandemic stuff, a little off topic, I've been riding out to the Rocky Point system out at the end of Skyline and exploring the trails, and there's a lot of gravel out there too, so that's out the front door. But yeah, it's usually like 3 days a week, like two kind of sneaking out during the weekdays, and then there's usually some kind of longer either sort of small group thing or exploratory mission in the service of putting together like a larger route or event on the weekends, being normal times.
Right. Yeah, and that's one thing I always have really appreciated about you is you are such a gatherer of people. Like generally on the weekends, like you've got some momentum going of like, let's go to this place or what about over here? And like it's always different. It's always kind of a mission. Like it's so awesome that you do that because you really like stoke the fire.
Oh, well, thank you. I mean, that's just kind of like how that's kind of what Brandon and I used to always do with our cross team. We'd just be texting our buddies and being like, hey, we're going to go out and check this stuff out. You want to come with us, just to get like a good group of folks? Because, it's more fun, connecting with people and riding with people and kind of sharing these places with people. But, the further you go and the deeper you go with stuff, it also becomes safer too to travel. I mean, that's kind of a big issue. I feel like that this pandemic has kind of shined a light on it. It's like, man, you really cannot get out solo to the places that you get out to with groups. Like our buddies Ryan Francesconi and Dustin Henderson did kind of a big one yesterday to this really beautiful looking area I have not been to, called Corner Rock, and I was following along via Instagram and was remarking it, like, you know, they did a very, very meticulously distanced apparently ride where they rode within sight of each other. So that was anywhere from like yelling distance to like a quarter of a mile or whatever. But they got way deeper than you would have been able to safely or responsibly want to go solo, unless you know, were prepared to like go solo bike packing out there, because it was like 100 miles and almost like 10,000 feet. So pretty big day.
Jesus. Yeah, the photos were insane too.
Yeah, it looked like there was a little bit of snow and some amazing like rock trails and stuff. But yeah, going that deep solo can be really spooky, because I learned that early. I broke a frame out at the end of, I took a wrong turn off a smoke ranch in like 2014 on this converted road bike that was totally maxed out on like 32s, knobby 32s. Huh. And my frame broke out there, and I had to kind of walk about like 3 or 4 miles before I kind of flagged down like a redneck in like a hunter truck. He turned out to be super cool, and he gave me a ride back to the St. John's Bridge. But that'll kind of teach you not to get in over your head without any kind of GPS or route or anything like that.
Yeah. It's, well, and that actually was kind of like, will you do like missions to Mosier and stuff solo? I've never known that.
Yeah. I in normal, like, this is all sort of like hypothetically under normal times.
Yeah, normal times.
I haven't driven out anywhere since all of this started. I've been doing everything from the front door. But yeah, like typically, if it's just like, I just want to go out for a good ride, solo ride by myself, known quantities, I'll often go out to like Dalles or Mosier and just kind of ride an existing route, or maybe do it backwards, or maybe do it adding some new twists. But I'm a big fan of rewriting things, because I feel like every time you re-ride something, you notice something different. Or if you do it in like the opposite direction, or if you add in some like new variables, like go out to some eagle caves that you read about, or go out and try to throw in some single track or something. But yeah, I'll do a lot of that stuff by myself. I usually won't go too deep, but I'll go out places, see some stuff.
And then are you, like, if you're gonna do, you know, this is all hypothetical, like, I want to do like a little ride out in Mosier, like, are you often looking at maps and kind of checking out, like, oh, is there a little thing, or is there, like, is route play?
There's always some angle of exploration. Yeah, without a doubt. I don't think Ryan or I will ever just go out for a ride to have a ride. If you're going to go somewhere to do it.
Oh no, did we lose him? Shit. Well, that would be totally the cherry on top. And that's where the wheels fell off. Why? Well, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know. Maybe he hung up on us. Hello? Who knows? I don't know. Maybe there's a thunderstorm all of a sudden. Oh boy. Well, I think you can still hear me, which is not quite as fun as hearing Ron. And live stream fail coming at you large and in charge. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Look at that big old... Where did he go? Classy. Very classy. I don't know. Well, I don't know. Fuck it. Maybe that's it. We did it about an hour, so... Thanks for tuning in to my horrible, sloppy mess of an experience. I appreciate the hell out of you guys, and we will do a part 2. How does that sound? And maybe, just maybe, I'll have the technical aspects figured out. Until next time, my dear friends, much love and respect. Auf Wiedersehen, adieu. Goodbye.
Don't forget about the poll. They tell me they're rallying up on Wall Street, but the stock market doesn't mean a damn thing to me. No. That's for people who already